Hello, everybody. We are live this morning talking about the pros and cons to traditional and indie publishing. But first, before we dive into that, we're just going to talk a little bit about what we've been up to. So, Michelle, what have you been up to?
This segment won't take a long time for me. I haven't been getting a whole lot done the last few weeks. However, I'm working on getting some audiobooks ready for my YouTube channel and maybe finally get that going.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's kind of a rainy, cloudy day here. So that's my prime writing weather. So maybe I'll still get some words done by the end of the day. Who knows? We'll hope.
Awesome.
How about you?
I have a new book out. My book is now finally out, writing a romance novel for dummies, and I'm super excited about it. I didn't write the entire thing. I just updated it, and there's about 4 brand new chapters in there, and that I wrote, but it's all updated with new information for today's publishing world. So I'm super excited about sharing that with all of you. And so that's what I've been working on, is working on getting all the marketing stuff ready for that book, and still working on my angel book, of course, and getting ready to go on another cruise.
Of course, always. Well, I'm super excited to get a copy of your book, of the Romance for Dummies book, and see what's in there.
Yes,
I'm
yes,
excited.
me too.
And it's a great segue into our topic for today, too.
Yes, our topic, which is traditional publishing versus indie publishing. And there is a whole section in that book about that. So let's talk about that. There are pros and cons to both, and there is no one right way to publish, because many people are successful traditionally publishing and many people are successful indie publishing, and there are many people who do both. And there is no, wrong way to publish. So let's talk about some of the benefits to traditional publishing. What do you think, Michelle?
For me, the main benefit of being an indie publisher is having control, I think. Being able to control your own destiny and your product and your publishing and all that sort of stuff. And probably one of the main benefits of going traditional is that you aren't the only one responsible for your product, and you kind of get some more clout. I mean, let's be real, everybody kind of has always had that dream of that traditional publishing contract and getting super famous. So there are definitely some roadblocks for indies, and then there are some real benefits to it too. But those would be like the main things I would say for both of them.
Mm-hmm. So for me, traditional publishing, I think the main benefit to traditional publishing, if you can get a big enough deal, then your book can be in bookstores across the nation. And that is a really big benefit if your publisher will get you prime space on the bookshelves, because then you will sell books without even having to, go out there and peddle them. Just because of the bookshelf space and where you're at. And so I think that's probably benefit number one for me for traditional publishing. But that also is super, super hard to get, right? You kind of have to claw your way up there. And I know a lot of people who are big, they started out with a small press and they started out not having those things.
Yeah. I feel like with indie publishing, you get to, like I said, control your own destiny because you don't have to get anybody to give you the green light.
Yeah.
You can do it. And at that point, you're kind of taking on a lot of roles that a traditional publisher would take on for you, like managing the editing process, designing or getting the cover, and the marketing, running data reports, trying to figure out what you want to do with all the subsidiary or alternate formats like, audio, translations, all those kinds of things. It's all on your shoulders. But at the same time, like you get to have access to data, which if you're
Yes.
traditional author, you only get reports on what you sold when the company decides to send them to you. You don't have control over making, when it's on sale. You don't get to decide hey, let's just run a promo and see if we can, get some more sales in. It's all completely in the hands and in the control of the publisher. So, for me, that was one of a lot of people might be surprised, but I've never actually submitted anything to anybody. So I made the decision to go indie straight from the beginning, just by deciding what my personality and my life would best align with. And for
Mhm.
me, that was a big choice because I really do like to be the one to make decisions.
Yes.
And I also don't like the time frame for a traditional publisher, because with an indie, you can really speed up the process between when you finish your first draft and when you can actually get it out to people. Where you
Mhm.
might have 18 months to 2 years waiting for the whole process with the publisher to finally even get it on the shelves. And it also has an expiration date on the shelves. Unless you just really hit it big and become one of those ubiquitous books that are just always going to be on the shelves at the store, they have a pretty quick turnover, and then your book's just kind of dead in the water. And
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of reports where even this very, very small minority of people who get a publishing deal and eventually get their books out there, very, very few of them earn out their advance.
Yeah.
Um, at which point you are not a good quality product for your publisher anymore, because they need to turn a profit. And so if they've lost money on your book, your first book, it's really hard for them to take another chance on you. And so it actually makes it more difficult to get that second contract if your first book doesn't earn out.
Yeah. Now, the publishers sometimes do make money on you even if your book doesn't earn out.
That's true.
So they could still turn profit on you even though you're not earning more royalties on your book. But sometimes they do lose money on people if they paid them a really large advance and then they didn't sell very many books. So
Yeah. And I've seen numbers where even traditional books don't sell like a surprisingly few amount of copies,
yes.
like a couple hundred or less even.
Yes.
And so and that's a huge margin. In fact, it's pretty much like any big business. You're trusting that you're going to make your money on the big headliner products,
Yes.
and that those other ones are probably not going to um, bring in anything major, and you just hope that maybe you don't lose money on them, and then you get a few surprise wins, right?
Mhm.
It's all kind of a gamble. And for indie publishing, I think the gamble is more on like how much you spend on marketing, but putting your product out in the first place is not necessarily a gamble at all.
Well, that's true. To some point, I guess, if you're brand new to publishing, you kind of have no idea what to expect when you publish a book. And so when you publish a book, you may be expecting, hundreds of dollars of sales that you
Mm.
don't get. So that could be a thing. What I did when I first published was I just expected nothing. Then if I got a sale, I was like, all right, I got a sale.
Yeah.
Keep your expectations really low and then
Yeah.
you'll always be happy is my, kind of mantra for life.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think
harder after you've had a book go really big and then you publish another one expecting it to do that well and it doesn't. And then you're like, oh man, it didn't
yeah.
do that well.
Well, that's a problem with both indie and trad,
Yeah,
though. It
it
really is.
is.
That's just like the curse of a successful book.
It
Um,
is.
but another thing about the timeline that I think a lot of people don't consider is that if you are chasing a traditional contract, a deal, with like your first book, I known to be people who spent years and years and years trying to sell their first book that they've ever written.
Yes.
And a lot of times we have a really hard time seeing that our first book isn't necessarily what it needs to be.
Yes.
But also not understanding that traditional publishers have very, very precise um, not standards, that's not the word, content that they're looking for, right?
Yes.
So they're looking for a specific kind of story that they know they can sell, that they know they can get on shelves, that they want to represent. And there's such a wide variety of stories that they get, submissions for, that's why so very few of them actually make it in. It's not that those books are bad that they turn away, it's that it's not what they are looking for.
Mhm.
And so I would always tell somebody, like, if you want to go for the traditional route, go for it. But just understand at some point you may need to think, okay, is it time to start focusing on other things or do other things, like write your second book? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe go ahead and self-publish your first book and work on your second one. And just take it book by book and see, do I want to self-publish this or do I want to submit this? I think that in the very beginning of self-publishing, in the very beginning of like the ebook revolution, there was this idea that if you've published anything that a publisher won't, like self-publish, that a publisher wouldn't touch you anymore. And that's
Mhm.
not the case anymore.
No, it's not.
It's the case by book.
Yeah.
Like if you self-publish a book, nobody's going to want it unless it just becomes crazy successful on its own, and then you'll
Right.
start getting lots of offers in. So if you decide to self-publish, you are kind of saying, okay, this book is going to be an indie book. But that doesn't mean that you are forever trapped into being an indie publisher, indie author, because the next book could be the one that you sell. And I think the more you write, the more your skills are going to grow, and the more chances you're going to have of finding a book that fits into some publisher's wanted list, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Let's talk about cost. So, one of the benefits to traditional publishing is they pay for the editing and the cover art and all of that. So, you don't have to pay up front. If you are looking at a publisher and they're saying, we're traditionally publisher, but we'll share the cost with you, and they're asking for money, then that's not a traditional publisher. So
Yeah.
don't think that you're getting a traditional publisher deal if somebody offers you a deal and then asks you for money, because that means they're a vanity publisher or a hybrid publisher, and they're gathering up their money from the author. That's how they make their money, is from the author, not from selling books.
Yeah.
So I would stay away from a vanity publisher if you at all possibly can.
Hmm.
But there is some upfront costs to indie publishing, but I think that they're a lot lower than a lot of people think they are. What do you think, Michelle? What do you usually pay to publish a book?
I would say I usually spend, no, I write shorter length novels, so probably around 50, 60,000
Mhm,
words. So I usually pay between $500 to $700 in editing and less than 100 in covers.
mhm.
And then we all know I don't do much marketing. So I would say a few $100 maybe on marketing, although I'm hoping to get better at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you are a first time author and you are looking at an editor that's going to charge you thousands of dollars for one editing pass, just know that they're that as amazing as that editor may be, and as much as they may, deserve to be paid that, just know that there are other options and that you can look around, shop around for editors. Always go to their website, see what their pricing is, or get a quote from them. A lot of times they'll do like a free first chapter, so that you can both kind of see if you want to work together. But don't just go straight for the first editing option you find, especially if they're super expensive, because there are very affordable editors who do an amazing job out there. So,
How do you find low priced cover art?
well, maybe you should answer that question because you're our cover person.
Well, I do covers for other authors sometimes. But I would say go look at pre-made covers if you want low cost covers, because a lot of times companies will make up covers, and they'll just put your title and your author name on there for you if you buy the pre-made cover, and that will save you money. Um, or if you're good with graphics, you can try and do it yourself. But I would issue a warning that get a lot of feedback on that, because a lot of times you can make a cover that looks homemade or just not right, and that could hurt your sales more than anything else, I think, is if your cover doesn't look quite professional enough. And so I would say definitely try to get a professional if you can possibly do that.
It's kind of a tricky thing between being indie and being trad with your covers and editing, because it's kind of a relief to have somebody take that job on. But for me, I would be really frustrated if I didn't like the product at the end. I've had like one little baby project that was traditional. It was a very, very small press, but I didn't like the editing that they wanted me to do. I disagreed with them about the developmental editing. And I'm still kind of like in this scuffle with them where they said that after 5 years I could get the rights back to my story. But they told me you can have the rights back to the original story you sent us, not the one that was edited, because they pay for the editing. But the weird thing is that all they did was tell me what they wanted me to change about the story, and then I did all the editing.
Yeah.
So like even the new words were my words, you know? So it's kind of this thing, and I've just been trying to decide if I want to fight them about it or not. But like I know a lot of authors that have had trad contracts where they have had, you know, disagreements with their editor, and maybe the editor is right and you're wrong about what the market wants. That's always kind of where the decision is. But I've known authors that love the covers they get and some that absolutely hated the covers. I've known traditional authors that hated that they wanted them to change their pen name, or wanted them to change the title of their book, or change the title series, or make it a series when they didn't want it to be a series, or different things like that. Because, you know, that is no longer something that you have any control or say over. Sometimes they'll say, hey, out of these 3 covers, which one do you like the best? Or out of these 3 titles, which one do you like the best? And, you know, but when you're an indie, you get to make the calls on all of those. And maybe sometimes you go in a not so great direction.
Yes.
Because you don't know what you're doing yet, or, you know, just hard to know sometimes.
Yes.
But then again, with the traditional, it's set in stone. Once that book is published, that is set in stone. You're not getting a cover change. You're not getting a title change.
No, not unless you get a movie made. Then they'll make a movie cover for it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's rare.
And I think readers don't like it very much, but usually from what I've seen. But with indies, if something isn't working, you can adjust. You can try again, and you can get, you know, just a new cover if you want to, or a retitle, even though Amazon's kind of being funny about that a year lately. But, you know, you can adjust and change and try and target into what is going to work best for your book a lot easier as an indie.
Yes, I think so. All right. Did we cover everything? Oh, let's talk about the difference between publishing with a small press and a large press. So what are some benefits to a small press?
With a small press, you're probably going to have a more sort of partnership relationship with them. And you're probably going to be able to get a better contract deal for all the subsidiary rights. You're probably going to be able to say, hey, I'd really like to keep, you know, the ebook rights if you want to just do paperbacks. Or if you want to say, I want to keep all of the movie rights, I want to keep the audio rights, the translation rights, and you can just do paperback and ebook. There's going to be probably more flexibility in what you're able to get in your contract deal with your rights. And you're probably going to get more help with them with marketing, from what I have seen, that they're going to have more of a vested interest in your product because it is more of a small house, right? And they're going to be more careful about making sure that every product gets the attention it needs. Where if you're just a really big conglomerate type publisher, you might just be kind of like swallowed alive in their list almost.
So then a lot of times with a small press, they already have a really good fan base for those types of books. A lot of them are pretty specific in what they sell, and so it's a niche market, and they have a fan base and a customer base already who buy their books, which is really nice. Another benefit to small press is usually you don't need an agent. You can submit directly to a small press. With a large press, you probably need an agent in order to submit to them.
One downside to a small press, though, would be the small presses aren't always going to be on store shelves.
True.
So a lot of them do not have the ability to get into like a Barnes and Noble or like on a Walmart shelf or in airports or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that is going to be one downside to a smaller press.
That's true. So if your dream and goal is to get into all the Barnes and Nobles across the US, then go for the large press. But a way to get to the large press is sometimes to publish with a small press first. And then you have some clout and credibility, and you can work your way up a little bit more and get that agent and get that big publishing deal.
Yeah. But you're probably going to be more likely to be able to get that second contract with them too, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
So you may even be able to get more information from them, like data-wise, like better reports. I know some authors who are working with smaller publishers, and they'll be like, hey, we're going to put your book on sale next week, so can you help us with this promo and this promo? So you can kind of get in on helping them to let your readers know and that this book's going to be on sale, where you probably won't be getting any of that information from a bigger publisher.
Right. You're probably not. What are some cons to indie publishing? We've talked about some of the pros to indie publishing. What are some of the downsides?
For me, I've had a real battle between the art and the business.
Yeah. Because
I'm not a very big business person. I've had to kind of make myself be, but I'm just not, and I never will be good at that. I'd much rather just focus on my stories.
Mm-hmm.
As an indie, you can't really do that if you want to sell books, and we all want readers. And so selling books is the only way to get readers for your stories. So it's kind of like this inescapable thing. You just have to become an entrepreneur if you're going to be an indie author.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. And I kind of have that entrepreneurial, I don't know, backbone in me. I love businesses and promoting stuff. And so for me, it's not a problem. But some people really hate that business side of it, and so they don't want to, they're not a numbers person, or they don't want to try and figure out what makes a story sell. And I love that part of it. I love to dive in and, all right, what about this story makes it selling really well, and what can I do in my story to make it sell better, and things like that.
Not me. I think one downside to to being an indie author can be that there exists this rat race in the indie community as well. Yeah. So in traditional publishing, it's much more accepted for you to only be doing one title a year or 2 titles a year. Any more than that, and you're actually probably going to get a lot of resistance from your publisher.
Yes, you would.
But as an indie, there becomes this like real pressure to put out a book a month or every 2 months, or, one book a week, or, there's just this sort of amazing content that some people are able to put out, and it makes you feel like, well, I need to do that too. And for me, I had a couple of years where I was putting out a book a month, and it was the most, financially successful period of my career thus far, but it also burned me out like crazy. And so it made it really difficult for me to continue having a career at all, because I burned myself out because of that sort of pressure to produce. And so it's kind of even hard to see where that pressure is coming from. Some of it's internal, of course, because you're self-driven to you know, get more content out there, more books out there, make more money, that kind of thing. But you also see it in the community where you're just surrounded by all these people who are constantly doing the same thing and striving for the same thing. And you see them producing. You're like, well, if they can produce, I can produce. And then also you get it from your readers. Like I think readers for traditional authors have an expectation of, I'm going to get another book next year from this author. But if it's an indie author and they've seen them putting out a book a month, then they're going to expect a book a month for forever. Yeah. And so you also kind of get that pressure from readers that they want you to keep producing at a rate that they want you to, right? And not what works for you in your life. Yes. And so that is hard as an indie, is just this rat race to keep production up is really hard.
Yeah, I don't enter that race.
I was in it, and I'm out. I'm out of the race.
I am out too.
You guys, you
not want to do that.
Have success. I will have my own successes and my own little journey where I am not completely burned out all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I am fine putting out books at my speed.
Yeah.
And that may be a book a year, it might be slow like that, but hey, it saves my sanity. And I did get burned out by putting too much pressure on me to try and write to a certain schedule and everything. Mm-hmm. And that didn't work so good. So,
and I don't completely regret it at all.
No,
because there's a lot of benefits I got from it, and I learned a lot. And I think my skills improved at an accelerated rate because I wrote that fast. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't go back and necessarily not do it. Mm-hmm. I would just be maybe wiser, more careful about the way I did it. But it also helped me to develop a fan base faster than I would have otherwise. And so now it is easier for me to kind of sit back and take my time because I have an existing fan base that I wouldn't have had before. So it almost feels like something that you might take in stages. But if you're in the early stage and you're really wanting to build a backlist and build a fan base and get money coming in, and so you're writing quickly, I get it. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying, just know that there is a dark side to the production mill where you can easily get burned out. And everybody has different capacities.
Yes.
And what they can handle. And what they're, and it, a lot of times when I've seen authors get burned out, and it definitely happened to me, it's not so much that the work itself is what burns you out. It's when it collides with other things going on in your personal life.
Yeah.
And so if whatever pressures you have on with your personal life collides with like this super crazy stressful schedule and all these like pre-orders and deadlines and stuff like that, something's going to have to give somewhere. And so you might end up really getting in trouble with that. I would say as an indie publisher, I think that there is more potential for more people to make more money as indie authors.
I think so too. I think there are the blessed few of the trad published authors who really do super well and who make the lion's share of money.
Yeah.
But I read, when I first started publishing, I read somewhere, and this is still true today, that 90% of income that traditional publishing brings in comes from the top 10%. And that is the small elite, the Nora Roberts and the Daniel Steele and those people writing and really doing fantastically well. And then the rest of us just get the tail, the long tail of it.
So like 90% of the authors are making 10% of the income. Just about, it's like, it's crazy.
Yes.
And I think that the number of traditional authors who are able to do that as their sole income is very small, where there seem to be a much higher percentage of indie authors who are able to live off their writing or who are able to substantially increase their earnings, to make a good, healthy earning off of their writing. So I think that the potential to earn money is higher. And a lot of that has to do with your ability to market and control the business aspect of your product.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean because you're indie, you're automatically going to make more money. It just means that you have more ability to get in there and hustle and make your book successful. Whereas with a traditional book, you have a lot less control over, the continued drive. And like I talked about, like that there's an expiration date on a trad book. There's not one with indie. You can keep
Right.
selling that book indefinitely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, my best-selling book has been selling the best for years and years and years. I wrote it in like 2014 or something like that, and it's still my best-selling book, you know.
yeah.
So they don't tend to do this rise and fall like traditional publishing. Now there still is, I think with Amazon especially, there still is this push to sell the newest books, and so you get more eyes on your new books. But if you can work it so that you get eyes on your best-selling books, you can still sell really well.
Yeah. And one other thing I wanted to bring up, which is probably just important to like a very small percentage of authors. But if you are interested in teaching at conferences, at writing conferences, you do get more clout as a traditional author. You just
You do.
do. As a traditional author who just got an agent or has a deal or has one book out, you're going to be seen as having a lot more, I don't want to keep using the word clout, but a lot more prestige,
Yes.
or like they're going to look on you more favorably
Yes.
than even an indie author with a massive backlist and who's making a six-figure income. Like they're not necessarily going to view you in the same way at certain conferences, just because of the general perception of indie author versus trad authors, and either even authors or conferences that accept indie authors as presenters still kind of focus them more towards the branding classes instead of like the writing classes, or they'll only have a few indie authors, versus like mostly traditional. And I think that's probably why I gear myself more towards indie friendly conferences, because there are beginning to be more and more conferences that are built to support indie authors, or I go to genre specific conferences maybe. But I think maybe it's starting to change or shift, or some conferences are making, an effort to try and include more indies, but it's definitely still in process.
Yeah, I think so.
And so if that is just something that like you want to do, you like going to writing conferences and you always thought someday I'd love to be a presenter, then getting even an agent or one traditional contract is going to be something that's going to really help you to sell yourself as a presenter to some of these conferences. So
yeah,
just another weird little thing to add on to the top of the consideration pile there.
All right, is there anything we forgot to talk about? Any pros or cons to either side?
I mentioned rights a little bit, but like we don't know where the world is going publishing wise. We don't know what's around the corner. And as an indie, you own all of your rights to everything.
True.
And you can resell those and license those as much as you want to going forward and continue to make income on it. And if you are getting a traditional contract, you will see that they are writing in clauses that grab as many rights for them as they can without paying you any more money for it.
Yes.
They're not paying you.
They take the rights to everything that could come up in the future.
Yeah, right.
Now.
Like any new technology that might be invented, or new platform, or new this or new that, they go ahead and claim all the rights for anything that doesn't even exist yet.
Yes, they do.
And they don't. That's what gets me, is they don't even pay you extra for that.
Well, and the one that really gets me is there was an author who was writing and they didn't like the direction the author was going, but in the contract she signed, they owned the characters in the world. So they fired that author and hired another author to finish the series out. Read your contracts really carefully. Don't sign a contract like that, because that's awful.
Yes, and be careful also that in your contracts that they don't limit what else you're able to write.
Yeah.
Like sometimes they say you have to write anything else under a pen name. Sometimes they say you can't write anything else at all, like under a pen name or anything. You can't write a blog article. You can't write a short story. You can't write anything. And then there's other ones that say you can write up to like a certain number of words under your actual name, or after you've published so many books, then they'll allow you to start writing something as long as it meets all these other criteria. So just know, like, if you want to be a hybrid author, especially,
Yes.
and you want to do a lot of things, pay attention to your trad contracts and make sure you're not signing away your ability to write. Because
Exactly.
for the publishing company, they're trying to own the product that they're acquiring from you and make sure that they can make it profitable for them. But you may be signing away your whole ability to have a career
Yeah.
outside of that one contract. So just be very, very careful of that. And remember, they're a business and they want to make
Yeah.
as much profit as they can
Yeah.
and have as many rights as they can. So
So
yeah,
intellectual property lawyer would be nice if you're going to sign a contract, especially a big company.
yeah,
You may want to get an IP lawyer to look it over just to make sure that you are not getting messed over.
yeah, definitely.
All right. I think we covered everything. Nobody had any questions. So thank you for coming and enjoying us talking about traditional publishing and indie publishing. I guess one last thing I want to say about making your choice is you can choose to be an indie publisher. You don't really choose to be a traditionally published author.
Yeah,
They choose that for you. So
yeah,
you can choose to submit to traditional publishing companies, but you don't really get to choose whether you're published by them or not. So that's one downside is, oh, we do have a question from Lisa. We'll hold on for you, Lisa. So go ahead and ask your question.
yeah. So that's what I said at the very beginning. As an indie, you control your destiny instead of
Yes.
putting it in the hands of someone else, which is the only reason I'm willing to be an entrepreneur.
Yes, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
And I kind of have this idea, like someday I'll just make myself irresistible so they come chasing me down.
That's right. Well, I was shocked when they came and asked me to revise the Writing a Romance Novel for Dummies, my newest book. Check it out. Because they saw that I was publishing romance novels and doing really well as an indie, and they wanted an indie perspective in their book. So I was
So smart
super
of them.
flattered
Yes.
by that.
They picked the right person.
All right, Lisa is asking, how do you decide which line to take? Like which
Like to go
to do
indie or trad?
traditional or trad? I would say it's up to your personal expectations. If you're really seeking for money, I think indie's the way to go. If you're really seeking for clout and recognition, trad publishing is probably the way to go. So it really depends on your goals. And if you want to see your book in bookstores, you probably want to try the traditional route. If you don't care about bookstores, but you want to be read by a lot of people, indie probably is the way to go because you control more of how many people have your book out there and how many people are reading your book as an indie.
Yeah. So I would say write down a list of what you want. Like, what is your dream? What are your ambitions? And then see which one will most closely align with that or will get you to where you want to go.
Yes.
So it is a really tricky thing, especially to decide in the beginning. But I would say in general, I would say to not waste too much time trying to go trad with one book. I think that is like the biggest thing I would tell any new authors is that if you do decide to go traditional, just don't waste too much time doing that and don't put everything into one book, because even like if you talk to Brandon Sanderson, for example, I've heard him in an interview, who is like one of the most successful traditional authors that also has done some indie stuff. He's starting to break out and do like his publishing his own things. So he's kind of like everybody's freaking out about his what platform did he use?
Oh, Kickstarter. Yes.
Yeah, his Kickstarter success and all this sort of stuff. But he says himself he had written like 8 to 11 books before his first one was published.
Yeah.
And so even though he did break into the traditional world, it wasn't with his first book. And I just see too many authors that really get hung up on that one book and trying to get it to sell, and they see that as like the thing that their whole career needs to be built around, and it's not, so just don't get hung up. Keep moving forward with it and know that indie's always there as an option.
Yep. And you don't really learn more by revising and revising and revising one book. You learn more by writing new books. And so if you've written a book and it just isn't selling to the traditional publishers, they don't want to see that book again and again and again. They've already rejected it. So go ahead and write a new one and submit the new one if traditional is the way you really want to go.
Yeah. I would say if you do decide to go traditional, kind of set some boundaries for yourself. Say, I'm going to submit my book to these publishers that are most likely to be good fits for my book, or these agents. I'm going to give myself this amount of time, and then I'm going to go another direction.
Mm-hmm.
So, and don't look at indie as like the failed route.
That's right.
Because
we're not failed routes.
Because I'm actually trying to be supportive of people who still want to do traditional. But for me, I would just tell everybody, just go straight to where the money is. Go straight to where you have control of your destiny and you can do what you want and you can find your readers and you can create the product you want to make and make yourself successful. You have the most freedom and latitude to become successful as an indie author. I honestly and wholeheartedly believe that. And so I would actually direct people towards indie first.
Mm-hmm.
If I had someone's ear, I would just be like, just go indie. Unless you just have it in your heart that the only way to make your dream come true is to get a traditional contract. Almost every other answer is going to be indie's better for you.
So I think it's really funny as people try to get traditionally published and they get rejection after rejection, they come back and they're like, well, I need to make my book better. But if they go and indie published and they're not getting sales, they say, I need to market more, which is really funny to me because what you're trying to sell is your book. And if your book has a problem, then it's not going to sell. And so I wouldn't necessarily jump to the conclusion that you need to market more if your book isn't selling.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I say about traditional publishing that is actually good, because it does, I think, a lot of times help you hone your work better, because you go back and the one thing that isn't selling is your writing. And so you're going to hone that writing and you're going to try really hard to make it better. If you're indie publishing, the whole thing is I need to publish another book and I need to publish another book and I need to market more. And I think sometimes we forget that, well, you probably also need to work on honing your skills as well.
Yeah. But I definitely think that the days of indie authors not having the same level of writing as a trad are in the past. Like, there's always going to be so many indies that, of course, there are going to be a lot of really bad books published by indie authors. But you're going to see really, really strong content that is at least at the same level or maybe even stronger than a lot of the traditional books you'll read. And it's because it was never a matter of ability with a lot of these authors. It was always a matter of somebody being a gatekeeper and letting them in. And so, and I think because indies are also business owners, we are very, very determined that our product is good, right? Like, you're talking about with those first books, a lot of times people think, oh, it's really good. And maybe it's not just their, maybe it's like an ongoing problem with some people where they just are not addressing that their writing needs work. But for, I think, a great majority of us, like, we recognize that our writing can always get better and can always improve. And that is a goal for us, is to just always put out the best content that we can. I would hope that would be our goal, across the board, that we're just always trying to become better writers. So this statement Lisa made, I just want to kind of look at it, but I don't want to sell my soul to the Kindle gods either. I think she just means that she doesn't want to feel like she's put everything in this one basket and now she's stuck there. And like I said, I really think that if you're talking about keeping your options open, I think it's actually better to go indie, because it's not just Kindle. There's Kobo, there's Amazon, there's so many other platforms out there. If you decide to go wide, you can sell from your website. You can, always, like we said, if you're able to make your book successful, get other deals in. So
Yeah.
like it may not be a traditional publisher wanting to come after you and be like, "Hey, let us have your book. We want to publish it." It may be smaller presses that want to do like just translations for you, or they may want to do some sort of like a chapter book, or they might want to do like TV or movie options or whatever like that. Don't think of it as, if you publish as an indie, like a Kindle book, that you're just like, that's the only thing you'll ever do with your book, because there's so many different horizons and so many different opportunities still out there. And I think that you don't need to be as worried about that as you are. And yeah.
And she did mention wanting to be on the bookshelf, and I
Yeah.
totally get that. And there is a path to that, both with traditional and indie, because the successful indies do get approached a lot by agents and
Yeah.
things to be traditionally published. So I think either path, if you want to submit and try to get into the
Yeah.
small press that's going to get you on that bookshelf, then go ahead and do that. And no one's going to say you're bad if you get a rejection and
Mhm.
you self-publish that book and then write another one. And you can always, submit a book that you've written, and if it gets rejected, go ahead and self-publish that one
Yeah.
and keep going.
Yeah. I was gonna say, especially since we're so specific on the store she wants in
Yeah.
and the book she wants to be with, then she could easily attempt that.
Hmm.
And because she wouldn't be waiting like a super long time to get word back. you know
Yes,
she wouldn't be waiting like years, or like
exactly.
submitting constantly to hundreds of different publishing companies. She could pursue this one thing and try her best to get that, and then if it doesn't, then she can pivot and go a different direction without a lot of harm. It's
Yep.
mostly, for me, just people getting hung up. um how about this question?
Feelings on YouTube as a main social media presence. My kid says it's the best option for the future. So, I am doing YouTube for and focusing on readers for YouTube. So I put all my audiobooks up on YouTube for readers, and I'm trying to gather in more fans that way. And it has been wildly successful for me. I have brought in a ton, not only a ton of ad money by doing that, but I have had multiple people tell me I am now their favorite author, and people go on to buy my books off of Amazon because they found me on YouTube and things like that. And so I think YouTube has been phenomenal for me. And now using it as a social media presence, I know a lot of authors who use it to talk to their audience, and they have a platform on YouTube, and I think it's a really good place to go. So
Yeah.
I would say definitely try it out. It doesn't cost anything, so
No.
other than, maybe a camera if you want, a microphone and a camera to be on YouTube, but I just don't even do that. I use my laptop.
I didn't mean to cover up your face.
Go
This
ahead.
is a big comment, but she had a couple of questions. Do you think that White is actually worth the time and money that everyone says it is, or do you think KDP is better?
That you're going to get a different answer depending on who you ask that question. I am the kind of person that says try different things and see how they work for you. So I did try Wide for an entire year. Last year was my year to try Wide, and I gave it a good old college try. I got several BookBubs Wide, and I tried really hard to market to the different platforms and everything. And after I compared my previous year to that year, I was down in income, even with all my ad spend and everything. I took everything out and looked at my income, and I was down in income. Now I hadn't put out a book under my popular name. I had put out a book under a brand new pen name. So that may have something to do with it. But I went back into KU and my income immediately went back up. So it just depends on the person and their platform and what they're writing. I write sweet romance, and that's where most the bulk of my income comes in. And that just works in KU, I think, better.
Yeah.
So if you're writing fantasy, that may work wide much better. Oh no,
Sorry.
Michelle has to go. But it just really depends. And so I have found KU works better for me and that particular pen name. Now I am writing paranormal now, and wide may work better for that paranormal pen name. I don't know. I haven't tried it yet. So I would say try it and see, and give it a good try. Don't just try it for a month, because if you take your stuff out of KU and try wide for a month, that's not enough time to really give it a good enough try.
Yeah. And sorry I woke you up, Lisa. I probably gave everyone a heart attack, including myself. I got along. I've actually said this before. We have other podcasts where we've talked about wide versus being in KU. It's KDP is Amazon, and then is it called Kindle Select?
It's KDP Select, yeah.
KDP Select is strictly when your books are in that KU program. So that there's a difference there. But so I would say personally, try the KU first, because there have been they've shown that the market share of KU is the second biggest audience, with only the rest of Amazon being number one.
Yeah.
So if you're listing like platform size and like market share, it's Amazon Kindle and then Amazon Kindle Unlimited. And then it starts being with all the other retailers. And the only way you can access the second biggest market share in the whole, Kindle world or ebook world is to be in the KU program.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of tricky and hard because of the criteria, and Amazon's being really finicky with some things with people that are maybe have their books pirated, and then they see it as breaking their exclusivity clause. So people are working with Amazon and having some tricky things there. But in general, it's a really smooth, easy process. And you get to find all these readers that don't have to take a chance on you with their pocketbook, because they've already paid their monthly fee, and so they get to try you for free. And so that the entry to like get them in to your books is so minimal, because they don't have to pay for your book. So there's so many good things about the KU program that I would suggest you at least start there, right? Give your book some time to find those readers, to get what you can from there. And then if you want to go and try wide, you can always, leave after your enrollment period is out and put that book out.
It's like 90 days.
It's like 90 days.
Yeah, you just go in and make sure that box isn't checked that you're going to re-enroll every time. And then after 90 days, you'll automatically be out of the Kindle Select program, and then you can put your book everywhere else.
But it's really hard to take your books down wide and put them in KU, because they just are like all over the place, especially if you use someone that like puts books on all the sites for you.
Yeah.
Then it's really hard to get your book down from everywhere and go exclusive.
It just takes a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's kind of a headache. So I was going to say, if you're going to experiment, I would say experiment going KU first and then going wide, because it's just easier that way. So
that's good advice. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for this. And we went live just on Facebook, and we're going to put it up on YouTube later. I don't know. We're experimenting with what YouTube likes best.
Yeah, they've kind of changed some things to make it a little weird. And we're hoping Laura is feeling better. She's sick today.
She is sick today.
And so we're hoping she'll be able to join us again soon. But yeah, that's where she is. But in the meantime, for those of you who do watch this on YouTube, you can subscribe so that you can catch all of our videos, and be sure to join our Facebook group, because it's a great community for all of you writers out there to ask questions and get answers and see what's going on in the writing world.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.